Well, President Trump is facing his worst approval numbers ever, skyrocketing prices, and a war with Iran that he has already declared the U.S. has won. Take a listen to this exchange between the president and our Bloomberg White House correspondent, our colleague, Jeff Mason.
How long are you willing to wait until you get a unified response?
Don't rush me, Jeff. Guys like you want to say, oh, so we were in Vietnam like for 18 years. We were in Iraq for many, many years. We're in for I don't like to say World War II because that was a biggie, but we were 4.5, almost 5 years in World War II. We were in the Korean War for 7 years. I've been doing this for 6 weeks.
Priceless. Jeff Mason is back with us on set. Of course, he's becoming our fourth anchor. We're very happy to have you. And our White House bureau chief, Peggy Collins, is here on set.
Yes.
Washington bureau chief. Sorry, it's been a long week already. I apologize.
I know.
Thank you both for being here. First of all, Peggy, I just want to get your impression about where these Iran negotiations are going, what you're hearing here from Washington, and if you think this approach is going to work.
Well, I think we're in a bit of a stalemate right now in the sense that we're trying to report out talks on talks. So Caroline Leavitt said yesterday in the press briefing that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are on their way to Pakistan for more talks. The Iranians also appear to be in Pakistan for some talks. But we're trying to get back to the table to then get to the point for the all-important negotiations around opening the strait. At Bloomberg, we're reporting every day really at that intersection of government, business, and the energy markets, because that is what really it's coming down to right now.
It's been so interesting for me as someone who's new here and new-ish-er to the energy market side of it. It is so tied into foreign policy at this moment. It is almost a little bit easier to get your hands around what are sometimes squishy economic concepts because it all matters in these negotiations.
That's right. And one of the phrases we heard a lot this week from business leaders and from policymakers was this phrase, demand destruction. And that seems to be where people are starting to focus. The longer the strait is closed, the longer people will be potentially under strain in terms of energy, fertilizer, and all of that filters through the economy. Certainly, Americans are seeing gas prices go up, but there's other things that could be affected soon in terms of farmers with food prices and things like that. So we are certainly looking at that as we head into summer travel and the midterms, where the economy is one of the biggest factors that voters are looking at when they decide.
Jeff, we all laughed at that comment from the president. It isn't you who's rushing him, but there are members of his own party, lawmakers who do want this to wrap up sooner rather than later, who heard his initial timeline for all of this and have seen it really attenuated over these last few weeks. So moving beyond what he had to say there, what is the White House thinking realistically about how long this is going to last and how long they can stomach this lasting as we see prices going up as a result?
Well, I think that comment is also emblematic of the pressure he's feeling. And to Peggy's comment and analysis as well, he knows the midterms are coming right up. He knows that people are concerned about gasoline prices. He is ready to be done with this war. And yet he is also someone who built both his business life and his political life on being someone who's a deal maker. So he doesn't want a bad deal. And that was a concern, that he wasn't going to get that good deal. So he doesn't want to be rushed by people asking him questions, or more, he doesn't want to be rushed by lawmakers and others in the town of Washington, D.C. who are giving him some pressure, including from his own party.
And people within his circle as well, including Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, who we know would really like to focus on the economy and those kitchen table issues ahead of the midterms. Speaking of, I want to ask you about this Jerome Powell news and the fact that this investigation has been stopped, potentially paused, because that was a big sticking point for the president, too. Members of his own party were saying, take the win, move on, let it, step away from this, let it go so that you can have your candidate confirmed and so that Senator Tellis will allow this vote to take place. Who do you think got through to the president? Do we know what finally made him change his mind, or was it just the facts at hand?
I don't know the answer to who, but I'm going to draw both of those stories together and say it actually wasn't a great week for the president.
Really?
Yeah, because that's one of the fights that he's been fighting. He really wanted to make a point with the Fed, and the result of that was his next nominee has been held up. up. So this investigation ending is a blow in some ways to him politically, and yet it's also exactly what he needs to get the person into the Fed that he wants to. The reason I say it wasn't a great week is he also had to, he didn't have progress in Iran at a time when he was saying, I'm not going to extend the ceasefire. He said that to me in a phone conversation on Monday. I don't want to extend. And then he had to extend. So it does, it shows that sometimes what the president says and what he wants is not what ends up being the case or what he gets.
Peggy, he wants all of this wrapped up. So as we reported, we have a vote in the Senate Banking Committee on Wednesday, scheduled for Wednesday of this week. That's going to happen. We haven't heard from Senator Tillis. As Christina pointed out, the DOJ investigation is over, but it's being shifted, so it continues. We haven't heard from Chair Powell if he'll be satisfied with the fact that one is done, but not the other. Talk a bit about that, the uncertainty that remains here. This isn't a tidy, neat thing yet, at least.
No, there's so much drama around the Fed, and usually it is not one of the most dramatic places that you can find news, but certainly this year it has been. And I think, like you were saying, David, there's an open question as to whether or not Chair Powell will leave the Fed board. I think that's the next big chapter in this dramatic play.
He has till 28 if he wants to stay as a governor.
That's right. Yeah. So it looks like, based on Warsh's hearings this past week and the decision by the DOJ on Friday and the hearing on Wednesday, as you said, next week, that Kevin Warsh will become the next Fed chair. The question is whether Powell will actually leave the Fed board or whether he will stay on and be, another influencer and power figure in the Fed, given all of his years there. So that's going to be the next question. And there's some wiggle room in what the DOJ said on Friday, enough that our reporting this morning is indicating Chair Powell will not leave yet if he thinks it's not clear that any investigations will actually be done.
And speaking of leadership shakeups, we were just talking to Congressman McCall about these cabinet shakeups and who might potentially be next. I want to ask you, who do you think could potentially be next for a change of job? Are we looking at Kash Patel, who's been coming under a lot of fire lately? Are we looking at folks like Howard Lutnick, who've been getting, a lot of, he's been under fire for his connections with Jeffrey Epstein. Who do you think is on the verge from the president to maybe need to update their resume?
Well, I'll take Jeff's line there and say, I don't know, but we are certainly reporting it out. I will note, though, there's been a big shift this year. Last year, the second term of the Trump administration was defined in many ways by its consistency,
it was surprisingly
its loyalty
stable, yeah,
compared to the first term. And it was a source of pride that, the cabinet secretaries were all, in place, and there was no churn. Now we're seeing the churn now. We not only had some cabinet secretaries step down of late, we also had the Secretary of the Navy exit this week. There's been a lot of change at the Pentagon during the war. So there's a lot of churn now, and it may be also related to two things, the pressure of the war, but also the pressure of the midterms coming around the corner.
Jeff, let's talk a little bit about President Trump's adventures in dirigism. He has gotten the U.S. government involved in private companies in a way that I think would be surprising to a lot of traditional Republicans. Spirit Airlines going through Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
You want to buy an airline, David?
He has now floated what? What is the latest thinking on how he might, or the government might approach this airline, which is not doing well?
Well, let's be clear, number one, that sometimes President Trump just says things that have not been vetted, that have not, I mean, that goes without saying that not everything he says gets vetted. So sometimes he will say things and then his policymakers will have to follow up, or his spokespeople will have to follow up and figure out if that's really what they're going to do. The interesting thing about that comment was it sent the Spirit Airlines shares soaring because of the possibility of government intervention.
And I should have set this up. He suggested maybe the Defense Production Act could be used here to what? They could take over this airline and send military. I mean, I would say it's a wild suggestion from the president.
And my mouth is open in part because, I don't know how you make that connection between the Defense Production Act and buying an airline that is failing. Other than the fact that this president and others have used the Defense Production Act for a lot of things, certainly during the COVID era. But how you connect that to this airline, other than something that President Donald Trump is very good at, getting the conversation going and maybe finding another private investor to say, oh, well, let's take a second look at this because the president's watching.
And also testing boundaries and norms and guardrails. And this is something we've seen not just here, but across the spectrum. I mean, even the piece we did about putting his name on all these buildings, I said to our City Labs colleague, Christina, I said, can he do that? And the answer is, well, no one's ever tried before. So a lot of these places, Peggy, talk to us about the way the president has and continues to test the system and why the system didn't quite seem prepared for that and is still struggling to keep up with the changes he's trying to make across the board.
Well, I think he's tested the limits, but also he sees the presidential and executive branch as having a lot of power, and they're using it. So with all of the executive orders that we saw come flowing out of the administration last year, that is one of the tools that they've used. But also the president himself has said, he's a business leader, so he's approaching a lot of these things like he would as if he is a CEO. And we've seen the norms be tested, as Jeff was saying, in terms of where government is as a deal maker now with private companies as well. We saw the Intel stake last summer, and now we're seeing some of the deal making going on with Spirit. The difference with Spirit that we've seen some business leaders react to is there's a question about the national security argument tied to it. Whereas with Intel last summer, there was a clear line there, and that's where some people in the markets are saying, hey, is this getting too far into the free flow of capital with private companies and the government?
Jeff, last question to you, which is just about his engagement with matters like this. I think last week when we were on the air and he did a big thing in the Oval Office about psychedelics and expanding research into that. There is a war going on, and I'm curious what his engagement with these other matters says about his engagement with that, the degree to which he wants to talk about or be engaged with what's happening in the Middle East.
I think you can probably conclude that he's over the war. He's just ready to move on. Even so, again, back to what I said earlier, he still wants to get a good deal. So he can't just walk away from it, and the U.S. still has major assets in the region. But he wants to talk about the ballroom. He wants to talk about the sidewalk. He wants to talk about these other issues. I think my last thought on that is he's really interested in talking about things that didn't used to be Republican orthodoxy. And that's fascinating, too.